Black Widow is the latest MCU movie. It's been a while since we've had the last MCU movie. But this is a movie that I wasn't really keen on watching, to be honest. I only watched it because my friend wanted to go. Also because of, I was more excited for the cast members that weren't Black Widow. I mean, you got Florence Pugh, who I'm a huge fan of. Rachel Weisz is solid, and I like David Harbour. So I really wanted to watch the movie for those three. And there was a moment I was watching this movie where I was worried. After the first opening sequence, we have a musical montage that's really grim. It's very serious. It's a cover of it Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, but it's done with like a sort of coming-of-age montage of the Widow program and Natasha growing up within it. And it was a really great musical montage. It reminded me of Joss Whedon's opening for Justice League. But that wasn't a good movie, and I'm like, I was sitting there in the theater, I was like, this is a really cool opening, but I don't think the movie's going to stick with this tone. And I was right. This movie starts off wanting to be like a Bourne film. It's got like the shaky cam, it's got the, you know, different locales, it's got the, you know, building being evacuated and surrounded by like people in SWAT gear trying to take down people. And, you know, people changing their identities and stuff like that. It starts off very Bourne-like. But then, when the movie switches over to Budapest, the movie turns into a super over-the-top, bombastic action picture, which, you know, it almost feels like there's some conflicting director vision going on there, because it feels like there's no artistic vision. The director is Kate Shortland. She's not really known for much. But I have an inkling that they only hired her for specific reasons. Number one, so they could have kudos by saying, hey, our Black Widow movie has a female director. So I'm going to need my pat on the back for that. And then the second reason would be that if you get an inexperienced director who's only done like 2-3 films, then you're allowed to put your thumb down on them. So if Kate Shortland was like, sweet, I got to direct Black Widow, I can't wait to make this, you know, very similar to The Winter Soldier or Jason Bourne. You know, I can just imagine, you know, her saying this, and then a Disney exec comes into the room and goes, whoa there, Speedy. How about we, you know, turn up the jokes? How about we make this more of a family film? You know, let's throw in some explosions in there. Let's have some James Bond homage. Let's make this a fun movie. And that's why, you know, it starts off very serious. And it's very Bourne-like influence, but then there's just like a part of the movie where it just turns into a cartoon. And yeah, so like by the end of the movie, there are people running through explosions, there are over-the-top, you know, bombastic CGI spectacle, and I didn't like that. I was hoping for like, you know, a Black Widow story, but a movie can't help but distance itself from the, you know, bigger MCU films with full of aliens and, you know, space battles and things like that. So let's go into what I liked. Obviously, David Harbour and Florence Pugh are definitely the standouts of the movie. David Harbour, he doesn't get to do much, but he's basically the comic relief. He doesn't get to do much. In fact, I was kind of disappointed in the fact that he didn't get to do much action-wise. You know, he's fighting Taskmaster at the end, and their fight gets cut short. He doesn't get much to do, but for the, you know, scenes that he gets, he's hilarious. Same with Florence Pugh. She should have been like the main focus of the story, but they sort of mishandle her. She's got this sort of bratty sister vibe going on. I really like that. I really like the chemistry with Scarlett Johansson. You know, she's, you know, the reason why I watched this movie. Rachel Weisz gets a little, not much to do, but, you know, I like her. So I like the cast. That's it. Oh, the music's pretty good too, okay. Yeah, but everything else I disliked. I mean, the action sequences are like edited to hell. Not enough hand-to-hand combat. Terrible, terrible villains. All the villains are terrible in this movie. Let's start with Dreykov. He's like a generic evil man, ego-driven. He's like a metaphor for masculinity and keeping women down, but he doesn't have much motivation, you know, at all. And he's barely in the movie. And then he's got like this, army of not super soldier, but he's got this army of mind-controlled operatives that should be at least as, decent at fighting as Black Widow herself, but they're barely in the movie either, and they're not really good operatives, and they could have, maybe hinted that, without your free will, you're not as good because you don't have that killer instinct, but they're barely in this movie. They don't give much of a threat to Natasha or Yelena. And then, of course, we got the big ace in the hole Taskmaster, who is just the worst operative in the history of life. I mean, it shows up on a bridge, it blows up Natasha's car, lets her live. It could have killed her right there, and then it's, the next sequence that it's in, it's driving a tank in the middle of Budapest, and it kills like 30 people by driving right through traffic. So it just doesn't feel like a very effective villain because it's just so brash. It's like, the operative is just in there going like, it's not like what was it, the Alec Baldwin's quote from Mission Impossible 5, it was 6, it was yeah, you use a scalpel, he's a hammer. Yeah, so like Taskmaster's all over the place. He barely gets to showcase the cool Avenger like powers and everything, and it's just there to suck and not catch the heroes. Yeah, the story's okay too because it's taking place after Civil War, so they have a reason why the Avengers can't sweep in, but they make a lot of references to the Avengers, and it gets really distracting because I want this. They should have tried to aim for more of a self-contained, lower stakes spy thriller, but I couldn't maintain it, and by the end, people are doing impossible jumping through explosions and things like that. And there's also a lack of tension because we know what happens to Black Widow. They needed a better writer. I mean, if you took this movie as is and you released it 4 years earlier, right after Civil War, people probably would have watched it in droves and shrugged and been like, this is okay, finally a Black Widow movie. But I felt like it could have been better. I mean, it was $200 million, and you couldn't come up. It comes off as a very generic action picture, which is not a big deal, but I thought this would be like the sort of love letter to the character, because she's gone now. But not really. I mean, Scarlett Johansson does get a few cool, moments. She's game physically, but it just needed more action, better direction, better script and story. Well, the story's okay, but it needed a better script for sure. And tonally, the movie's all over the place. It starts off super serious, like a Bourne film, and then they introduce the family element. So there's a lot of joking. There's a lot of like, it kills the tension a lot because characters like, oh no, we've been captured, but now we're not. Oh no, I'm being held at gunpoint, but I'm not. And just the whole last 30 minutes is just cringe. Lots of like bad choices, and it also feels like the movie's holding back. Like they keep referencing, Black Widow's terrible past. She was such a killer, but it doesn't want to dirty its hands because it's a Disney movie. It's for trying to be a 4-quadrant film that makes the most money. So they don't show her getting her hands dirty. They don't show her being an assassin. They just reference it and mention it, and a lot of stuff happens by mention, by proxy. They don't really show anything really, and yeah, so overall, I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's a very disposable superhero movie that should have been more like The Winter Soldier. I mean, it probably should have released this 4 years earlier, grabbed Paul Greengrass, asked him to write a little bit, direct it, and maybe the movie would have been more serious and better, but this movie's very forgettable. So I give Black Widow a 6 out of 10.